Good morning, everybody. Cowboy here. We got Veles, the Dark Raven of the Deep State. This is a lot of people's favorite show, one of my favorite shows, perhaps my favorite show to host. That's a tough call. We have so many great guests, but I really enjoy doing these shows. And V will be along, by the way. He says he'll be here shortly. So we will have the trifecta on today. Before we get started, please take a look at the description. We have a couple goodies in there for you. We have our paid sponsor, Algo Factory. Got an algo that I built. It's pretty cool. Check it out. And then Veles, you just find Veles on the Discord. I don't even know if we have any Veles Substacks or anything like that. I'm sure the audience would love to have it, but it's time to do like I did, get that coffee ready. I've got my notepad on these shows because I actually have the pleasure of being able to take notes and then ask questions and have comments, but you all should also do that. Take your notes, watch the show 2 or 3 times like I always do. I'm going to turn it over to you, Veles. How you doing, sir?
Thank you, my friend. Good morning. And as always, you and V are far too kind. Yes, well, and Algo and V, if they've got a question, ping me on my phone, which we do to one another at 2, 3 in the morning when something pops into our heads. So very glad to be with all of you today. Thank you for stopping by wherever you may be. Interstate truck drivers, airline pilots, and everyone else out there in the grand universe of the planet Earth. So for those of you who saw the Discord post, I identified the topics we were going to cover today, which is extensive, but a lot of it deals heavily with artificial intelligence investments in the same data centers, power grid. You know, almost just for a rogue's sake, I think we need an all-encompassing term that when we use that term, it means like these 8 things that all relate to that. But anyway, my normal opening at the beginning of any of these programs, if you want to reach out to me personally or have a question about Rogue or content or one of my programs or whatever, you can reach me at the following email address, which is 1917VELES@gmail.com, 1917 Victor Echo Lima Echo Sierra @gmail.com. And also, if you would like to be added to our Discord chat, just go ahead and send me an email and I can send you a link. And then, as always, please remember to visit Gustimos at perpetualassets.com for additional financial options, and equally check out algofactory.tech as well, and give some attention to my 2 fine colleagues here at Rogue. So to begin, EM Burlingame, Tom Luongo gave a shout out to EM's program the week of November 17th, and I certainly second that motion to the floor. There were a ton of points in that November 17th EM Burlingame program here on Rogue, and definitely worth checking out. I know everybody has a full plate out there, and I appreciate the fact you're even making time to listen to my program, but there was a lot there. And if you can't catch all of EM's programs, please at least catch that program from the 17th. Tom Luongo and Apex Money. My normal caveat, when I point out anything another alternative commentator says, it is their view. Tom said something very interesting on his Sunday podcast. He was laying out the why and the what of everything from USAID's shutdown and other measures to cut off funds to those who work for various Apex elites. The net being to deny them resources to launch effective demonstrations in the United States and other moves. With those funding resources being cut or impaired, the other side has to find a source of money, not just to force the United States to keep the war in Ukraine running, and I'll speak to that in a moment, but achieve their other objectives, namely to prevent the United States from improving its political sovereignty, as well as sustaining our financial sovereignty. Noting prior programs, we've been improving our political sovereign nature incrementally, and London, among others, is not happy about that. And equally, those parties are not going to stop, and they can't stop because they're all in. Not to mention the very real possibility by the time William becomes King of England, he may literally become the first king since the 1500s with the ability to tell the London Corporation to shove it. Sidebar, you may have noticed Harry made a fool of himself this week on a U.S. talk show, only outdone by Andrew's disastrous I don't know Virginia Guthrie and I don't sweat interview. So where are they pulling funds to keep their very real armies in the field and on the streets of America? For Tom Luongo, they're pulling assets out of what those in the intelligence field would call financial caches or money drops. funds tucked away for just such an emergency, to quote Foghorn Leghorn. How does this manifest itself? Well, in a number of situations, it's some, not all, of the rather strange crypto transactions we've been hearing about. And certainly Bitcoin has dropped quite a bit of late, and that's because a lot of Bitcoin has been sold lately. As well as strange transfers of precious metals, including some of the activity we've been seeing in silver. To paraphrase the Chinese tactician Sun Tzu, sometimes you need to let your adversary begin their moves before you stop them. That way you know where all their assets are. We live in interesting times. Peter Zehan, probably good V, hasn't joined us yet. Peter believes we're headed to a global depression. Please recall what I said about October 2026, and we're not dispensing investment advice. Was Zehan's input on the why of that possible event solid? Well, actually, yes, it was, and it is worth hearing him out. Do I trust him? Absolutely not, but the message is being put out there, and by someone who's paid to put it out there, and that is worth noting. Quite frankly, future guest, Frank, quite frankly, will have George Webb as a guest on his program Tuesday, December 9th. I know there's a wide range of views out there in our rogue audience when it comes to George, but that said, I know that I'll be clearing my calendar to catch what George says on that program. Celestial things. My thanks to our rogue listener Turning Japanese, who pointed out on Discord Tuesday evening we have a full moon and winter solstice coming our way. In fact, there's a lot more than that. Yesterday on December 4th was the peak illumination of the last supermoon of 2025. What is a supermoon? It's a moon who occurs when the moon's orbit is closest to Earth at the same time as the moon is full. They come in cycles of 3s and 4s and will not occur again until 2026, until November. Thank you, Echo. When you have a full or near full moon near the winter solstice, it's called a cold moon. The winter solstice will be the 21st of this month, and as always, keep your eyes open. Our Apex friends love times like this. Your date-by-date breakdown then is as follows. December 4th was the supermoon. December 7th, the moon and Jupiter will be parallel to one another in the sky. December 13th and 14th is the Geminid meteor shower. December 20th is a new moon, and I would point out that's a biggie to our elite friends. The 21st is the solstice, again noting the timing of the 20th and the 21st. And December 22nd through the 23rd is the Ursid meteor shower. And for those of you who are fans of the gray bearded one and his programs about ancient civilizations, both of those meteor showers have equally high significance. Private equity. Per Private Equity Hub, several PE firms beyond those I often mention are investing in healthcare. One specific area of healthcare is called precision healthcare. So what is precision healthcare? As you need to become familiar with this term, my friends, and quickly. Precision healthcare allows doctors and researchers from across virtually all medical disciplines to determine the best care for each individual patient, identify disease mutations or changes in genes that cause it, patients with undiagnosed conditions, and finding those undiagnosed conditions, avoid serious side effects from medications, and identify genetic risk factors to help improve the patient's quality of life. To tell you the truth, these types of approaches were prevalent in private healthcare clinics and services for high net worth people. Recall what I've told you about the Mayo Clinic's treatments for senior executives at certain corporations. They literally filter the blood of senior executives and add oxygen, remove cholesterol, and add vitamin compounds, etc., all tailored to their specific genetics. There are more firms now offering such services to us, the little people, and PE wants in on this. Who are some of the additional PE firms moving into the medical space, and specifically this area? Well, that's Leonard Green, Shore Capital, Revelstoke, and Brightstar. We're not offering investment advice. We're only pointing out this activity is interesting. Equally, private equity is in the business of not losing money, and monitoring what they do can make you a buck. Note also Ian Burlingame's program with us on Thursdays. He pointed out certain genetically tailored drugs have a low potential to be effective due to the reality of mitochondrial genetic material. Buyer beware, and research these things thoroughly before you would receive such a treatment. Soup. Many of you at this point are probably aware of the following. I'm just pointing out that a senior executive at Campbell's Soup was filmed stating their meat is genetically grown. For fans of that practice, they call it Frankenmeat. I'm pointing this out to both make fun of and point out what's going on at Campbell's, but it's also a reminder to review all your food and any food source who's from a large corporation. There are plenty of soup options from better firms, and as I often point out on our programs, remember to check out your local health food stores or make your own soup at home. Hey, V.
Hey, that's a very good point, especially that whole Campbell's thing with the bioengineered ingredients and whatnot. And
the Frankenmeat.
Yeah, the Frankenmeat, 100%. It's like people are making a big joke about it, but the guy was actually serious. You know, take it to heart, folks. Like what Veles said, go to your health food stores, make your own soup at home. You can make better soup at home than you can.
We lost V there, but Veles, didn't you also say that I think there's some internal emails, Trader Joe's, they were talking about putting mRNA in the meat?
Not so sure about Trader Joe's, although more than possible. The other one I was going to bring up on this topic is Aldi's.
Well, that's the same company. I mean, it's not. They were the same company and they split.
Yeah, Aldi's supermarkets, it's since come out that they've got a lot of chemicals and stuff in their foods, which I found funny because when I was in Europe, there's Aldi's everywhere. And I didn't have time to compare the ingredients on the products that they're selling in Europe versus the United States. But the other thing too, folks, is, and there's a number of videos on YouTube, everyone, that will guide you on, you find these words or phrases on a label, and it's basically ground up insects. But, you know, being from the Midwest, this is why many a hardcore dad who'd been in the military when I was a little kid would wax poetic around the dinner table, especially if I was over at a friend's house, about the fact that, you know, taking a deer or other game, you know, throughout the year supplemented the family's meat supply. And because they shot it and they prepared the meat, they know whether or not there was anything wrong with it, obviously. But more now than ever, you know, and I mentioned this on a prior program about private equity investing in, I won't mention any brand names because I can't recall exactly who it was, but, you know, these various sandwich places where they had to dispatch technicians to adjust the meat slicers because they couldn't slice that thin. And they wanted them to make the meat even more thin than it had been. And I, you know, there's some folks I know in the local area who, in conversation, have shared with me that either they supply food ingredients to local restaurants or they run taverns and things themselves. And I don't say this to be funny. They are absolutely howling about the cost of any kind of protein source right now.
It's crazy, man. It really is.
And, you know, and the other thing too is all of you know, and V and Algo certainly know this about me, you know, I periodically get in my car and just drive across America, and or I travel a lot. And every time I'm cruising down the highway and I see one of these giant chicken factories.
Oh, yeah.
And there's no windows. It's all dark, you know, and it's like, I want to know who you're selling to, because I do not want anything coming out of that big matrix plant over there. That's a big Twinkie in our national debt. Elon Musk said something recently, and I thought I should follow my own advice to all of you, that being I should double check and triple check what he said. Upon review, I can state Elon was correct on the following data point. The United States national debt interest payments are roughly $1 trillion, and our military budget, official military budget at least, is capped at $895 billion. This means, boys and girls, we're spending more money as a country paying just the interest on our debt spend on our military budget. You know, V and Algo, maybe moving to Bolivia or Peru is exponentially looking more attractive, or perhaps we can move to Argentina and live in Gus's pool house.
Yeah.
That's spooky. Mike Moore shared a statistic who is scary if indeed the case. He said roughly 60% of the United States GDP at this point relates to AI, data centers, and power grid builds. Mm-hmm. So to the point I just made a moment ago, I researched that figure and found no, that's incorrect. I think one of his young bucks gave him the wrong figure. It's not 60%, it's 6%. However, that's still very important. We're talking about 6% of the GDP of the United States, which is in the trillions of dollars. Now, without that investment, U.S. GDP would have been 0.1%. This has resulted in some economists joking that the U.S. economy is 3 AI data centers in a trench coat. All other sectors in the U.S. economy had a negative impact on GDP. Nothing to see here, folks. Move right along. Technology switch. This is a topic who I know drives a lot of people crazy, and especially for those of you who don't work with information technology on a regular basis, and that being the speed at which things change, both in technology, who's owned by who, etc. We at Rogue, and me in particular, have advised on the importance of the software you use to protect both your PCs and your cell phones. And as I've shared with you, one of my more critical concerns is my cell phone rather than my PC. And one of those topics we raised was about what sort of VPN tool are you using, and we had mentioned a number of us were using Surfshark. A friend of the show recently pointed out that Surfshark is now owned by Nord.
Oh boy, which is owned by Israel, right?
Well, yeah, via offshore holding companies.
So I thought Nord was European owned.
It was originally Swiss.
Yeah, I think is it not still Swiss?
There's the hands of our friends are involved the same way Microsoft does all their code work in Tel Aviv.
Who wants to bet their bottom dollar that the data center that we're building under the White House ballroom, right, for $315 million, which is what it is, right? Who wants to bet their bottom dollar that there's Israeli backdoors to that? I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised.
Everybody's got backdoors to everybody else's backdoors. The problem with Nord, or many of the well-known firm folks in the VPN space, is they're anonymizing your traffic, but not to themselves, because they're selling, again, I shared with you one of the IT companies I worked for where I brought up during a meeting, hey, we're collecting all this data on how firms are using our software in CAD CAM in various specific industries. And one of the executives nervously looked at me and goes, well, yeah, we've been selling that for years. And it's like, oh, dear God. All right. So the net of it is you need a VPN tool that just does virtual private networking and is not tracking you or selling your data. Now, I'm not recommending, air quotes, the following company, but I just wanted to make you all aware, as equally via an algo. I have removed Surfshark off my PC and off my cell phone, and I've switched to a company called Mulvad, M-U-L-V-A-D. Mm-hmm. Their product is still independent, and it does not track your activity. They've also received a number of kudos in the industry for the excellent speed that their VPN tool is able to offer, which I will point that out, that because of the nature of what a VPN tool is trying to do for you, it does tend to slow down because it's filtering the traffic. At a minimum, do your research and check out other VPN options. But the point is, whenever you do searches, you'll often find these websites and stuff that pop up and say, here's your top 5, and Surfshark is like number 2 and Nord is number 1. Thanks, Echo. Those are all the same company, and they pay for that stuff. So again, it was a real direct experience friend of the show who I trust her judgment, and she's like, oh my God, get off Surfshark immediately. You need to use this one. Now, does that mean I'm not going to come back in 6 months and say, okay, get off Mulvad, they got purchased by Nord? Yeah. That's exactly what I'm telling you, because I mean, when I worked in data centers, and I've got, we're all friends here. I've got folks that are from India. I've got folks from Mexico. I've got Americans. I've got whomever. I've probably got 2 or 3 people from Israel, all working in the data center. And every afternoon, somebody is leaning over my cube going, hey, we got to stop using this and now switch to this. Yeah. Or this antivirus software has been compromised. We're already rolling it out, and we were driving the managers of the firm nuts. And so in most cases, it's like, yeah, the company will catch up with, the employees 8 to 12 months from now. But as far as everybody working in this data center is concerned, oh, and by the way, my cousin Sanjay's got this discount website. You can only get to it if you type in the URL, but it's got the latest discount codes for PCs and stuff. They're all being shipped.
Mulvad has a browser too. I didn't know this.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, you can use. I'm using Mulvad on my cell phone and on my my personal computer.
Nice.
You can also buy a hard. I mean, if you're just kind of like protecting your IP, that you can buy an actual hardware piece, and you can write your own VPN. You don't have to rely on some other company. Like this is all very doable without relying on anybody.
It is, but much like a very good friend of mine who's also a listener to the show and who I trust his judgment completely, he will often make statements like that to me, and I will look at him and go, "You do remember, I just play an engineer on TV. I do not know how to write code."
No,
So-
but you don't have to. You can buy one Amazon off like for like $200.
By what?
It's a hardware.
it's
Like
a hard. It's basically a hard point VPN.
Oh yeah, I heard of those.
yeah, you just buy one, and then you're not. It's a one-time spend. Now you got to
Okay.
trust the maker of that, but there's always going to be that trust.
There's
link.
one
Like,
that I have that I saw. It says "Made in Tel Aviv." I'm sure.
yeah,
Nice.
mine actually has like these two curly sideburns coming off the side of it.
From their affiliate in Mumbai.
Yeah, I actually had to buy it down in a sewer in New York.
The Ukraine conflict. Whether via websites like Southfront or others, Ukraine continues to fall back as Russian forces advance. Yes, there's been a few holding actions or counterattacks by the Ukrainian forces who were successful, but they're not enough, though, to prevent the overall advance. So why is the proposed peace proposal sitting on a chafing dish? There are multiple reasons, and here's one of mine. Yes, there are interests, shall we say, in the U.S. who support Ukraine's moves against Russia. We could even go so far as to say the people backing the Donald thought they could get something out of it. The masterminds in Europe, not the least of which were trying to sustain dying industries in Europe and also need an infusion of capital, that and the usual money laundering, where senior government officials enrich themselves in Brussels. Russia knows all of this, not the least of which because of their excellent state security services and an army of mercenary hackers they employ. Hackers who eventually discover the data Russia's senior leaders want simply because few outfits on this planet spend the kind of money in cybersecurity to really tighten things up. Loosely said, we know why certain parties in Europe want the fighting to continue, and this is especially true of France and Germany. Though also recall, France and Germany perpetually argue about how to position themselves to be the sole leader of Europe, and we have more than 500 years of history on that topic. Why is Russia keeping that meat grinder running? My gut says because they know any effective fighting forces on the Ukrainian theater right now are Europeans, both on the ground and in leadership centers. Recall also, Russia several times has been able to determine where European military commanders are in Ukraine and hit them with cruise missiles. In my opinion, Russia wants to bleed European personnel who are in Ukraine to inflict as much pain on Europe as possible. They want to hammer Ukraine and the Europeans who are involved so hard that everyone thinks twice before ever starting a war again. A park in Vienna, or meeting in Vienna. Shared previously last October, I rode a bike through one of the city of Vienna's main parks. Was it the same park of the historical moment I often reference? I have no idea, but it was symbolic nonetheless. After Wednesday's program with Gus V and Algo and CJ and the topics they covered, I found myself reflecting again on moments who would compel people to feel the need to have a meeting in a park in Vienna. My counsel is to focus on facts, my friends, and not the intentional efforts to keep you rattled, because the powerful want you rattled. Plan where you can, prep where you can, filter information very carefully in the next year, as well as the disinformation will only increase. Remember, call it a correction, or to quote LL Cool J, don't call it a comeback. Call it a correction, call it a depression, call it a recession. We've got something coming.
Mm-hmm.
It may be October of 2026, it may be earlier, it may be later, but that correction has to happen. And we know that. And the closer we get to that, the more there's going to be all sorts of market pumping to draw in money before everybody who's powerful takes their wealth out of the markets and a whole host of other things. So just my normal reminder, the efforts to confuse you are going to increase. Penny for your thoughts. There are rumors that now with the end of the penny in the United States' currency, it may not be the end of those moves. There continues to be rumors that now they're going to eliminate the nickel. And of course, at some point, we're just going to be on dollars.
We are heading the way of Zimbabwe, man. That's exactly what they were doing.
Don't say that.
Would you have problem with my currency and stock market?
I have a Zimbabwean prince on the phone. After a while, you don't even see the code anymore. Referencing the Matrix movie, I saw the code this week. The various social media sites were suddenly flush with statements about an old favorite, that being income tax is illegal. Also sites that are pointing out, here's the FOIA'd statements from closed congressional testimony about the fact everyone knows income taxes are illegal. Then the Donald this week floating, we may just have to eliminate income tax entirely. So what's the deal? Flat tax, they actually know it's illegal and have to get ahead of it before somebody actually gets a court case in their favor. This is another distraction. Who knows? I'm just pointing it out. We remain anonymous. Isn't it funny when the sort of things we cover on Rogue occur right up the road from me? A local news station near me ran a story recently who caught my attention, and I would have missed it if it hadn't been for YouTube directing it to my account. This is because I don't actually watch the local news on TV, so I guess I owe the NSA a gift basket. My hellos to everybody out in Utah. Anyway, they ran a story about an immense data center being built near me, and no one knows who's building it. The reason for the story is local citizens are concerned about the amount of water the future facility may consume along with its power consumption. The region is also a farming area, so you can understand both, why it's being built there and why locals are concerned. They need that water for farms as well as everything else. The local news station investigated and found that the land purchases and similar were 2 layers of LLCs. They could have kept digging, but I don't believe they did. The local government refuses to disclose who it is, and no wonder given the potential tax and jobs revenue to be created. That and the usual white envelopes exchanged on a rural back road somewhere. Further, there are layers of NDAs on everyone to prevent any kind of disclosure. That's because the media said, everyone who didn't want to talk said, I'm under a layer of NDAs. Now imagine how widespread things like this are across the entire United States. Further, the parties involved would not go through this much trouble to hide this unless their attorneys and consultants had warned them about the rising negative mood nationally on this topic. Supposedly in mid-2026, whoever it is going to have to go public because construction's beginning. Japan and China. We've got a lot going on of late with Japan and China, and no, it's not the normal occasional dust-up between the two countries with over a century of animosity between them. First, Japan's Prime Minister, Sanae Takaichi, has dispensed with years of Japan's ambiguity about Taiwan by implying both weapons transfers and dispatch of Japan's self-defense force if necessary, both of which crosses hard lines with China when it comes to anyone talking about Taiwan. This has created a diplomatic storm between the two countries. At one point, the Chinese Consul General in Osaka was talking about beheading Takaichi. Have no illusions, as there's no way Japan upsets China unilaterally. The U.S. is at least marginally involved in this and aware of what Japan is doing before Japan does it. If there was actual shooting in that part of the world, there's no way the U.S. Navy is not immediately involved. In China, hitting Japan economically with a ban on seafood imports and discouraging travel to Japan are some of the things that are occurring. However, is that the full weight and force of China's options? No, but the reality is both countries do so much business with one another, and there's so much regional investment, it would be disastrous to put that at risk. We also have a bit of a self-inflicted wound by China on this one as well. Please recall what I said about Russian diplomats and their history with China when it comes to China issuing memos on their diplomatic positions. This is the phrase about the Russians wanting to know when China is going to issue their final memo on a particular issue. China tends to do this to themselves periodically. They say their position on a topic is immovable, and when challenged, they issue a memo and then a final memo to other governments. Then they keep issuing final memos, because their government knows their limitations, as does everyone else. China cannot simply sit by and do nothing, and so they issue a second or a third version of their final memo to express how upset they are. In card games in the West, like poker, this is where you have to show your cards, but no one at this table is going to dare to do that. So governments just issue another strongly worded memo. But we have to remember there's a very important cultural angle here that's being exploited against China. You may have noticed in contemporary Chinese history, there's not a lot of women in senior political or economic roles. I assure you they exist, but they're often not in official photos or video, and there's a deep reason going back hundreds of years. Simply put, China's had a horrible history whenever a woman finds herself in a senior leadership role, and this goes all the way back to the Chinese emperors. During the Cultural Revolution, the Gang of Four was led by Mao Zedong's wife, Jiang Qing. Behind closed doors, even women in China get nervous if a woman is in a public senior leadership role. It's simply a deep part of China's history and not an indictment against women. So what do we have going on? Japan's first woman prime minister challenging Chinese pride in the eyes of other governments and not just threatening with trade, but military matters. Do not think for 1 minute the people in the world of psychological influence are not leveraging Takeichi for all she's worth to keep China rattled. It's just not what she says and does, but the fact it's coming from a woman leader directed at China. Trading card heroes. Going to borrow Mike Moore's reference for any media figure who's a plant and an actor, aka trading card heroes. On a prior program, I noted we have a bit of free agency going on among various news readers and others who portray themselves as alternative commentators on YouTube or X, or people wearing hats. These are often individuals with 1 million followers or at least a few 100,000. It's amazing what you can do with bots. And just a reminder, more than half of all internet traffic is bots and malware. The rebranding for these folks will continue, and it will be widespread, and some of them quite literally may have terminal accidents. Recall my comments on the prior segment. In many situations, people will rebrand themselves because you cannot have influence over millions of people and then just disappear. You've been on the inside. You know too much. So we need to rebrand you, or you need to figure out how to rebrand yourself, because shutting you down can include self-hanging in a hotel room with a mysterious autopsy to follow. Along those lines, I would point out on November 24th, the adult film star Jenna Jameson has announced she's been baptized and given herself to Christ.
I thought she was Jewish.
Well, she switched sides again. I'm awaiting her appearance on Joel Osteen.
Oh,
God. For 3 ways.
What did you say, Cowboy?
She's been known for 3 ways.
Oh, my God, you're hilarious.
Pum. You'll be amused by the degree of the rebranding out there. They're all actors in an orchestrated game, and they need a TV series to keep paying their bills.
Yeah, basically.
Memory hole. This is not the long memory hole I keep tracking, but there are 2 items worth noting. First, we still have not audited the U.S. gold supply, including Fort Knox, who was mentioned in the last election. By the way, this is why I keep harping on using the courts and that court case with the FBI about the missing gold in PA to legally force these agencies to either put up or shut up. Second item, yes, we still do not have an autopsy in the death of Charlie Kirk. Why do I get the feeling I'll be saying that exact same statement in April when the snow melts?
Well, they don't require autopsies in Utah, do they?
No, and I was just about to get to that.
I think you said that last week. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no worries. Why do I get? But wait, there's more. And speaking of FOIAs in your own research, to what Alga just said, there's a number of oddities in the United States. Things like Louisiana follows French law, the only U.S. state who does that, and then Kentucky, Virginia, and others being commonwealths and not states, and the list goes on. So as Alga just mentioned, the state of Utah has some interesting laws. The medical examiner does not release autopsies, as in that state doing so is illegal. They're not considered public information. You either need a family member to release it or authorize its release. The other option, a judge could release it. But you'll also notice all the major media companies out there are not submitting motions to any judges in Utah to have it released. However, based on publicly available information, the autopsy still hasn't happened, even if they can't release it. Rodney Dangerfield from Back to School. The answer is 7. On November 26th, something unusual occurred that is the sort of thing where Veles is tired, rubbing my eyes, and then double checks what I think I'm seeing on the screen. My shout out to Valley Girl for posting a story who at the time should have been everywhere and instead was mainly in Asia and the Associated Press. That story being that a 7-building apartment complex in Hong Kong caught fire that day. Let me say that again. Not a building in the complex, all 7 buildings. I'm sorry, that's straight up donut factory or Micah Dank kind of content. By the way, I don't know the reason, but Micah got kicked off YouTube recently and was only able to return a month or so ago. I'm sure he hit too close to home with his content or used licensed music. I know we've gotten in trouble for that one. If a message needed to be sent in Hong Kong, I'm sure it didn't need to take out the entire apartment complex. Yes, I'm fixated on the number 7 for several reasons. First, it's a sacred number, and we know that. Second, it's Hong Kong, where numerical significances are hugely important. Case in point, for exotic cars in Hong Kong, including your occasional Rolls-Royce, your license plate is a big competition for lucky numbers or symbols. Like the United Kingdom, a license plate number is something you own rather than in the case of the US or Canada, where you change it out arbitrarily every few years. Some examples are license plates like the following. A license plate with just the letter W on it went for $26 million. A plate with the number 28 was sold for $18 million. A plate with the letter V, sorry V, for $13 million. And who has the license plate with the number 1 on it? It's the chief of police for Hong Kong. Now, just for amusement, who held the number 7 plate? Well, that was Heng Ji Kao, known as the king of stock speculation, who bought the plate in 1989 for $5 million. When he died, it transferred to his daughter, or daughter-in-law, Luing Yi Lai. I was unable to find further information on his daughter-in-law, nor any correlation with the fire. We'll see what those in the alternative research community can come up about what happened in Hong Kong, if anything. Messages. On prior programs, I've noted the anger in Washington, D.C. when Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky thing broke. Not because of sex in the White House. I mean, go check JFK or LBJ for that. It was the revelation about secret signals of Bill's ties to Monica. You see, outside certain circles, no one knew world leaders were sending signals through their clothing or colors, or what their wives were wearing for that matter. It's not just world leaders. It's been revealed everyone from Hollywood celebrities to senior executives of corporations are sending signals the same way. When it comes to Hollywood or entertainment circles, where various relationships, Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, are staged for a variety of reasons, whether as beards or other arrangements. Sometimes the paid person in that relationship is actually afraid for their life. So when they're interviewed at a Hollywood event describing how happy they are, why are they wearing the warning color to their friends that they're actually in danger? And that's a real thing. And the Pennsylvania gold again. Small update for the treasure hunters called finders keepers in the FBI. Per my last update, the attorneys from both sides were to submit to the judge following the government shutdown whether there were any remaining disputes on the materials the FBI was to produce. Both lawyers have told the judge there's no remaining disputes over the evidence. The judge has now indicated they want both attorneys by February 7th to submit another statement. There are absolutely no issues about this case and it can go forward. They also are to indicate by what date can they actually go to court. I'm willing to bet we may find just before that happens that Finders Keepers is paid a couple of $1 million by the FBI in a settlement connected to a violently specific NDA. If I was Pennsylvania, I would oppose that happening because if the Union gold was in fact discovered on land in PA, that state is owned money by the government. This is politics, though, and I'm sure the U.S. government will suddenly find reason to cut off money to Pennsylvania if they press the issue. We will see. But you heard it here first. Cybersecurity. The good thing about angry and overworked air traffic controllers is they're federal employees. With the protection of federal employees, they're also unionized, and when they start walking off the job, airports tend to close. The latter usually attracts attention no matter what those trying to cover it up do. This is not the case with cybersecurity professionals, especially when boards of directors and private equity and their own self-interests refuse to report cyber attacks even when the FBI is knocking on your door. Outside of federal agencies, cybersecurity professionals lack the protection of unions. So where am I going with this? We've reached a point in time, my friends, where cybersecurity professionals, quite frankly, are critical to the integrity of the United States as much as air traffic controllers and our military and Coast Guard are. And those cybersecurity professionals are overworked, they're abused, and quite frankly, the industry does not reward cyber professionals unless they put certifications as a priority more than the work of their jobs. I saw the same pattern in telecommunications back in the late 1990s, where by 2001, when there were layoffs, the hardest working people in the offices were getting laid off. The people who were kept were the folks who didn't do their jobs but passed a bunch of certifications. There's a growing consensus out there in the information technology world that fatigue among cyber professionals is reaching levels never before seen. Lastly, do not think of outsourcing that work. Even commercial firms often insist on Americans doing the work, or at least the managers are US based, and rightly so. Also, I've never worked with an offshore firm yet who didn't cut a lot of corners, something you really don't want to do with cybersecurity. Sometimes the answer is to run from your state. I'm still encountering people who argue the point with me about Illinois or California, among others, who if you move from those states, they're going to hit you with 2 or more years of property taxes they claim you owe them. I've literally been in bars or restaurants telling folks to stop arguing the point with me and just pull out their phones and look it up. Then I see their faces lose all expression and mutter something along the lines of, "I don't believe this," who's then followed by anger and, "Well, this is illegal." To which I remind them, of course it's illegal, but the cost of fighting the state in court will be about the same amount of money as you owe them. Zero Hedge on Tuesday pointed out California now wants a 5% tax on individual wealth greater than $1 billion, and who would apply to billionaires living in California in 2025, which, by the way, is an after-the-fact tax, which is illegal. By the way, that's 50 million of your dollars, folks. There's no way a measure like that will be passed without certain key billionaires having a loophole. That's true in any U.S. state. The point is, not only are such taxes going to continue, and with increases to be sure, California is now taxing you based on net worth alone. We've discussed on prior programs the exodus of high net worth people out of California the last few years. There was also a sentiment among the wealthy in that state, and I've spoken to some of them. Certainly, Calmer.
Real quick. So they're taxing people based on net worth, not even on income?
Correct.
I didn't even realize this, man. Holy cow.
It's an all new tax they're levying in California on top of all the other taxes. And what gets me, folks, is it's one thing when politicians say, because you hear that, I mean, V's out there, you hear this in New York and New Jersey all the time. Well, we're going to tax the wealthy. And it's like behind closed doors. Yeah, go ahead and try it. Because all of our money is so tied up in so many different things, you won't even know what to tax. And my personal favorite from lawyers I knew in Washington, D.C., by the time you get that legislation written, the people you're trying to tax have already moved it into something that you don't even know what the hell that is. But in the case of California, it's mind-blowing, Gavin. It's mind-blowing that it's like, okay, because a lot of California's tax revenue is based on property. So, and of course, the Palisades just burned to the ground. It became a cinder, and we're going to turn it into a bus depot and low-cost housing. But now they want this 5% tax on individual wealth that's greater than $1 billion. And like I said, if you have $1 billion or more dollars, that means you're going to owe California 50 million roughly per billion, which adds up. And besides, I'm sorry, even if I've got $1 billion, you're taking 50 million of my money. Man, I'm calling the mafia. I mean, it's like, no, you don't. Or at a minimum, just let me pay. Here, let's do this. Let me pay the 50 million as a charitable donation and give me the tax break, something. But this is, I don't want to say desperation. That's not the right word. But this is what a form of desperation, folks, looks like. And we've discussed on prior programs, all the folks who've been leaving California. And as I said, there's folks I know out there who said, well, eventually somebody in Sacramento is going to put this nonsense to a stop. I mean, yes, we're still going to socially engineer, and we're going to still be of this political persuasion, et cetera, but we're going to stop all this crazy taxation. And of course, what have we got? No, we've gone full nonsense and shenanigans. And it's, as I said, it's a retroactive tax. And if they're doing this to billionaires, I mean, the old joke is the average person is impacted by whatever, high gas prices, my food was made in a lab, whatever it might be. But people of high net worth are not impacted. They're starting with the billionaires. And this is where I channel Gus and say, if they actually go through with this, and if they actually try to make this stick, then what the hell are they going to do to the average Californian? And I'm not, I mean, I'm saying that with gallows humor. I'm not saying that because good, they ought to fall into the ocean. We've had this discussion, folks. That state is $3 trillion of the U.S. economy. We got 10 million people in LA County alone. I don't care what you think of California. They're an integral part of this country. And a lot of what this country does is done out there. And it's my age-old thing of we need to find some common ground, even if we disagree on 75% of what we all believe. So the state of California has achieved finally the lyrics of the Eagles song, "You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave." V and Algo, any further thoughts?
No, that's just like where and when does the madness end with California? It used to be back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, it was the best managed state in the country. Highest income, highest net worth, highest GDP, absolutely the most beautiful topography in the world. I mean, literally, it's one of the most beautiful places on God's green earth. It's gorgeous. What an incredible resource-rich state. And now it's a shit show. They've wrecked it. At what point does somebody step in and be like, they need to wipe these assholes out? Like they need to get rid of the entire Democrat Party. This is like, it's ridiculous. It's madness. These far leftists have destroyed it. Now they lead the entire country in homelessness. They lead the entire country in welfare. They lead the entire country in every measurable, terrible metric you can imagine. California is on top of the list. Like, how the hell do you do that? And this idiot, this Patrick Bateman psychopath who's tone deaf wants to run for president. Like, what's he running on? Look, he's a psycho. He's insane. And
there's a lot to Algo, I hear you coming.
The smile never touches his eyes.
Yeah, right. Look at his eyes, man. That's a good point, Cowboy. His smile never touches his eyes. Look at his eyes. It's always that psycho sociopath look in his eyes.
That's not even a smile. That's a fucking grimace, dude.
The best that Disney animatronics can come up with. There's a lot to what V said, folks. There's a lot. And again, our position on Rogue when it comes to, loosely said, the political process in the United States and political parties, neither of which on a certain level exist. However, yes, certain parties kept telling Gavin, do this, do that, implement this, play your cards right, we'll let you run for president. And of course, what's happening? Well, there's some other candidates being floated who, loosely said, appear more rational. And if you're Gavin and his inner circle in Sacramento, you are sweating profusely because that doesn't just happen, which means, say it with me, Cecil Rhodes, right on his deathbed, realizes, my God, I thought I was in charge and I was being used the whole time. Adam Weishaupt, the creator of the Illuminati, in his later years realized what? My God, I'm not in control of anything. I've been used. Now we've got 3.0. And of course, what is the other, I wouldn't say bellwether, but what is the other very, very optics important among the elite, noting what I've said on today's show, about this topic? Halle Berry. Any of you catch this one? At the there was a big hoo-ha Hollywood event in this week in Los Angeles. And before Gavin Newsom took the stage, Halle Berry, while introducing him, ripped him a new one about the damage done to California, the industry, what's happening to Hollywood. I mean,
I missed this.
Oh, yeah, baby. And let's be honest, my friends. Let's be honest like a heart attack. Halle Berry's got enough money, and Halle Berry's got enough backing, and Halle Berry's got enough movies. She doesn't need to say something like that. But to have an African-American woman who's part of the system and is respected.
Gorgeous.
Yeah,
gorgeous,
and is respected. She's not, some others I could think of. She's not Mad Cow.
I have the link. You want me to play it real quick?
As long as we don't get taken off the air.
I think we should do that. Hold on. All right, just you keep talking. I'll get to the exact point.
So, anywho, but in calmer circumstances among friends of mine of both political persuasions, because as I've said, I've got Bernie Sanders supporters that listen to this show. I've got people in Michigan that are running around in the woods listening to this show. And I tell them both the same thing. If anybody's attacking New York, anybody's attacking Illinois, anybody's attacking Florida, Texas, or California, we can go back to arguing later. But those states are integral to this country, regardless of what you may think of them and the people who officially are the actors running them. We cannot afford as a country, because I was thinking of this in the car this morning while I was grabbing my coffee and my sandwich, and I thought, yeah, it's the old Tavistock routine, folks, and it's Matthew Ehret's excellent work and several other folks. It's the thing about the Civil War. America has no central bank in the 1850s, early 1860s. So we force a civil war. And what happens? We go from no central bank to 14. How did we get 14? Because there was a central bank in each Confederate state, and the Union had to create one in order to fund the war. Now, when the war ended, did London and others get what they wanted, which is a highly divided U.S. with a central bank essentially in most U.S. states? No, but they still got a central bank back into the United States. And it's kind of the same thing here. This fragmentation, this balkanization of the United States continues to be their goal. If we are fragmented, we are not united when it comes to the things that matter most. With that, go ahead and play the clip.
Absolutely.
Back in my great state of California, my very own governor, Gavin Newsom, has vetoed our menopause bill, not 1, but 2 years in a row. But that's okay, because he's not going to be governor forever. And with the way he's overlooked women, half the population, by devaluing us in midlife, he probably should not be our next president either.
Well, after him there,
I'm sure she said a lot more, but that was a clip that I could play real quick without yeah. But wow.
Yeah, and that's, again, folks, that's a message. That's a paid for message, not just to him, but to the people backing him. And trust me, they heard that loud and clear in Sacramento. So moving along, 2 crazy days and nights items. Neither of these stories have been confirmed, but they're incredibly interesting. The first one, movies, and I quote, "Way back in the day, prior to this movie studio becoming much more than just a studio, they had a lot of artists. The artists needed training. The male artists kept pushing they wanted to draw live, nude females. Eventually, permission was given, and it became a free-for-all zone of debauchery. Even though the head of the studio had initially said no, most afternoons, he would be there watching and staring, and then afterwards go wash his hands for a solid 30 minutes. When it became known how much the pay was for modeling and how it could lead to other jobs at the studio, the person in charge, other than the studio head, had to put some type of filters on the whole thing. It was decided you couldn't be older than 23. It was preferred you were blonde, but the occasional brunette was fine. They had to be willing to go for quote-unquote cocktails after the modeling session with whatever artist won the random drawing that day. If they did those things, then they could come back for more modeling and eventually get a full-time job at the studio. Were there ever models that were underage? Of course. They had to learn how to draw young women too, right? The head of the studio was there for those sessions as well. What did NT, the person who heads up Crazy Days and Nights, say is the answer to what I just said? Disney Studios and the late Walt Disney. Continuity of government, I quote, "He barely snagged a 1-paragraph obituary, but the death of this architect is a big one. For all his adult life, he would tell people when asked about his job, and he would reply, 'Well, I work for the government.' That's all you need to say in big government towns like Washington, D.C. for people not to ask a follow-up, such as, 'Well, where?' It's code for something top secret. It used to mean CIA, but these days there could be any type of secret government organization. He was recruited out of college and designed offices and buildings and stash houses and so much more, all in secret for the U.S. government. From time to time, he also did other things. One of those things is more massive than anything else. It consumed over a decade of his life in the actual building, and the rest of his life was consumed with hiding it. For many years, he was in charge of building a structure which is one of the biggest in the world. Oh, he wasn't in charge of the stuff above ground, You see, he was in charge of what was below ground. He also came up with the ideas of what to tell the press each step of the way in case there were any sort of failures in the structure or something that didn't work right. It was also his idea for the name of the company that built it, but had no idea someone would actually make a plaque with his name on it. He did it just to feed to reporters so they would have no place to turn for answers, because the company didn't actually exist. With so many governments wanting the secrets of what was beneath, he had to go into hiding for pretty much the remainder of his life. There was only one exception to this, which was a project he did afterwards, which was a one-off at the request of this royal family in the Middle East who wanted something similar for their own private area of a public structure. So what's the answer? The architect is Curtis W. Fentress. The project? You already know what the project is. It's the Denver airport.
Wow.
Biggest investors in data center builds also note the latter half of that he built something like that for someone in the Middle East. Well, there's maybe 3 places I could think that is. So who are the top 10 investors in data center builds and hyperscale rollouts? We'll explain hyperscale in a moment. Thanks to Data Center Magazine, which is spelled with the English spelling, CENTRE, we have that list. First up is Magnetar Capital, based in Evanston, Illinois. Next up is an old friend of mine that I used to work for, the Carlyle Group out of Washington, D.C. Then Digital Bridge in Boca Raton, Florida. RDN Capital in Paris. Everyone's favorite, Bain Capital out of Boston. Stone Peak Infrastructure Partners out of New York. EQT Infrastructure based out of Sweden. Macquarie Asset Management based in Sydney, Australia. Another old favorite from the 80s, KKR out of New York. And at the number 1 spot is Blackstone, just to confirm, not BlackRock, but Blackstone. Those are the top 10 folks who are investing in data center builds. Memphis and Elon Musk. Never mind the ancient symbolism of the city's name. There's some odd things going on down in Tennessee. For those of you who know, Nashville's a juggernaut and booming. Knoxville's doing well, but Memphis just cannot seem to get a break. Memphis is to Tennessee what 2/3 of Alabama is to that state. So on top of Memphis's problems, and I mean seriously, folks, there are people who've seen combat who don't want to go to Memphis, is Elon Musk. Musk has built one giant computer data center to support his XAI platform, and a second one is being constructed. Locals say the emissions from the plants and the construction are making them sick. Further, due to a lack of available power off the grid, secondary generator systems have been built who run on methane. Even when you consume methane in a clean burning system, you're still going to get a smell. Musk admits he intentionally named both of these sites Colossus 1 and Colossus 2 based on the supercomputer from the movie The Forbin Project, a movie I've talked about on several occasions with all of you. Palmer Luckey and others have been naming things based on Lord of the Rings symbolisms. I'm a touch more sensitive about Elon's reasoning as I remember how the Forbin Project movie turned out. AI is hungry. My thanks to a longtime listener of Rogue and a close friend for the following. A brilliant guy who, if he ever met Patrick Ryan, I fear they would simply become balls of energy and start communicating with one another on a higher level, leaving me behind. He provided me with an article from last week who reviewed the other impacts AI and data center builds are having. Very loosely said, AI and the data center builds have a voracious appetite for methane, please see previous story, copper, fiber optic, and aluminum. Noting the methane comment, I will also go there for the land of potential conspiracy theories. We've also covered on Rogue a year or so ago my position that many South American governments who rely heavily on copper exports seem to have been overthrown all at the same time. Before those unusual elections in those countries, and like I said, I call them an overthrow, Peru and Chile and certain parties out there had stockpiled huge amounts of copper. Evidently, I wasn't thinking big enough because at the time I surmised a bunch of leftist governments saying they wanted to restrict exports to protect the people's national assets was a medium-term money-making scheme. Note their thinking was obviously much longer as the parties involved knew the AI data center power grid thing was coming. I need to listen to our own broadcasts more closely. They were playing the long game. So back to aluminum. Data centers rely on a lot of aluminum for cooling units, server racks, radiators, the building framework itself, and the list goes on. Here's a bit of irony. How do you make aluminum? You make it in an aluminum smelter, and like steel, those require immense amount of electricity. Metal manufacturers need cheap power, and as we know, the cost of power has been steadily rising throughout the United States. The U.S. metals industry, with this boom, has the added challenge of overseas competition who can produce aluminum more cheaply, at least for now. One of the biggest competitors being Indonesia, who also produces bauxite, which is a key part of how you make aluminum. China has also ramped up production. Typical of U.S. corporate planning, for years, aluminum smelters in the U.S. have been closing. Now they're trying to build capacity during a period of increasing costs. We're not dispensing investment advice, and these developments are public domain information and could represent an investment opportunity. Perhaps not as a long-term investment strategy, but certainly for a financial quarter or two, both in the U.S. and internationally. AI, data center, IT firms are now stockbrokers. If that last segment wasn't interesting enough, there's even more. Earlier this week, I sent a photo to V and Algo of the old Enron logo and color palette, but instead it said NVIDIA, ENVIDIA, as a play on the old Enron name. What was Enron doing back in the day? Well, they were leveraging extensive and fast trading of energy futures in the markets. The business media were falling all over themselves at the money and the flash of that company back in the day. But the joke about NVIDIA was frighteningly more true than I might have imagined when I sent that joke to the boys. You see, in the market, there's a term in the information technology world known as hyperscalers. What the heck is a hyperscaler? Well, they're large-scale cloud service providers who offer a one-stop shop set of services for computing systems, storage, networking services through vast geographic infrastructure. They're known for their ability to scale quickly and meet high demand. Hyperscalers guarantee their data centers have the power they need, say it with me, because now they're all getting involved in trading power in the markets, just like Enron. Now, to set the table properly, let's remember Enron had some real pirates running that company, but the concept was actually sound. It was just the SEC and others didn't slow them down or keep them within the law. That said, it's still rather scary to read articles that Meta, Microsoft, and Apple, just to name a few, have either requested or have already obtained authorizations from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, to sell wholesale power. FERC, by the way, are the same good people responsible for legally and safely rolling out small modular nuclear reactor technology who's coming. Please note my sarcasm. Hyperscalers believe the quote-unquote market is not building power and data centers fast enough, so they're investing skin in the game, to quote Meta, to let folks know they're serious. I think that's a danger of overheating an already overheated market. One of the things hyperscales are enabling, you'll love this, is they want to sign contracts for futures on electricity from power plants who aren't even built yet. Let's pause for a moment and consider what I just said. They want to buy power futures for power that hasn't been produced yet from power plants who are under construction. We're not talking about Gus Demos selling futures on a mine in Indonesia producing gold or bauxite. If the mined material is late or less in quality or quantity than anticipated, the market will work that out. If a power plant doesn't go online in time, that means an entire contract model of purchased power for data centers and other power consumers is going to have one heck of a problem. Among my many professional credentials, as many of you know, is I'm a licensed project manager and program manager. I've been there when bonus structures for executives and public marketing efforts may get impacted because something I'm running may miss a go-live date. So what do you think the pressure is like when the project you're running is a late power plant? We're talking not just about day-to-day operations in data centers. All that data center power consumption is carefully managed against what software and processing ability they have online, which means you can't roll out new IT offerings or scale up if the power isn't there. For me, the opportunities for risk and the insurance industry are mind-blowing with all of this. I cannot imagine what the premiums on those insurance policies must be, which then led me to consider maybe we should go total the big short and develop some kind of power grid credit default swap. We can call it the rogue swap. V and Algo, let's talk after today's program and see how we get that off the air. Blackmail, murder, and the usual story. I've begun reading the book entitled by Andrew Lowney, who focuses on Andrew and Sarah York. First, yes, there's always a lot of books written about high-profile people. On my bookshelf are 5 books focused on Jeff Epstein, and 1 or 2 of them are the normal situation in these cases. Someone pools a bunch of publicly available information and spits out a book to make money. In the case of Lowney's book, that's not the case. It's heavily researched, and he's written highly acclaimed books like this previously. And also, he's one of the folks who put the Spy Museum together in Washington, D.C. And after being a person who's gone there, I've got respect for his work. While early in reading this book, something leapt off the page on an old topic of blackmail. As discussed on Rogue, blackmail has been a form of currency among the elite and the peasantry for hundreds of years. In the modern age, with the prevalence of technology, and to paraphrase Patrick Ryan, blackmail ages quickly, becomes stale. It's also more easily transmitted. The public domain the last few years has run with the revelation it's not just about Epstein and his blackmail operation. It's about how prevalent blackmail has been in any media or high-profile environment. Just ask Hollywood and Sean Puffy. Where I'm going with this is another theme I've shared about how intelligence agencies buy intel from one another. Frankly, it's easier than doing it yourself, replacing your own agents in danger. Plus, intel agencies all know they lie to one another, and therefore you need to buy a lot of the same intelligence data to compare and discover the lies. In the movie, The Patriot, with Nicole Kidman's character says, "I'm not afraid of the person who wants to buy 10 nuclear warheads. I'm terrified of the person who wants just one." The just one in this case is the following. Who was buying up blackmail information on Andrew and the royals? Well, it was Muammar Gaddafi of Libya. When the Arab Spring reached Libya, there was rumor the reason for the overthrow was he had dirt on weapons deals with the French government where key officials had taken payoffs. Those officials were getting concerned, supposedly, that Gaddafi might use that information. As a result, France worked with other governments to get him out of there, and Italy was promised, don't worry, we'll keep the oil pipelines open from Libya to Italy. What if there was more? What if Muammar had lots of blackmail on a lot of people, including the entire royal family, as a dead man switch, should there be efforts to remove him? The problem with the dead man switch, though, is you have to be alive to turn it on or have trusted people who will, which does not appear to be the case with this. Guardians of the Matrix. For those of you who listened to EM's program the week of November 17th, there was a subtlety there about thermodynamics on many levels. The world's apex elites and other elites are very aware of the same reality of physics. Or in my book, the social architects and program managers they have deploying and managing these efforts. I've used the reference on a couple of programs about the scene in the movie My Dinner with Andre, where the main character discusses how you make the inmates of a societal prison act as their own guards. It's what EM means when he references the panopticon. That's a prison where everyone sees what everyone else is doing, including the guards, because it's circular. Everyone is watching everyone else, from the guards to the inmates. It's the ultimate surveillance system. Let this be another reminder. I think all of the criticism of the movie at the time when it came out in '81 and subsequent years was by design. There was simply too much conveyed in that movie the system did not want people to hear or understand. So what does this have to do with thermodynamics? All these warnings or statements on YouTube and X and other social media sites about the surveillance state are a distraction. Yes, there is considerable surveillance in many parts of our lives, and there are methods to deflect a lot of that if you wish. But the electronic systems have limitations. It's why, rather than assertive systems attempting to dig into your life, the system uses so many passive systems. For instance, here's a discount on your credit card if you make purchases with these vendors. Here's another discount if you purchase groceries from this store rather than another one. Let's take a photo if you're going through TSA, and the list goes on. But again, technology has limitations due to thermodynamics. Therefore, how did the apex and other elites get around that problem? They're using your own citizens against you. Recall my comments about what, key word, what is causing friction among people in the same countries in Europe. It's the same sort of things occurring in the United States. You have a set of people in society who have taken it upon themselves to be the gatekeepers. They're the ones who will not speak to you at holidays, much less at any time, because of how you voted or what you believe. They're mindlessly reinforcing the system. I have 2 powerful observations on that. The first is back when I was supporting research and development for the Department of Defense, I had in the portfolio of our work smartphone app technologies and similar being created for use, quote unquote, overseas. I saw what those tools can accomplish. Second, I attended conferences where other firms' developments in that space were discussed. You can imagine the cold chill when I saw those courses at Stanford University in California, where the same approaches and social influence models were discussed for consumer product companies. That, folks, is how you influence our fellow Americans, Canadians, British, Europeans, and the list goes on, to monitor one another. Sadly, they leverage and manipulate those members of society who've lost other forms of community or family in their lives. Please note the attacks on religion. This is what the author Jonathan Hart was talking about in his book, Lost Connections. I would point out he was a liberal author who pointed out the dangers of medicating people rather than treating the root cause of not having a family or societal connections. Yes, that includes traditional social groups and religions. For him, it was the danger of the pharmaceutical industry medicating people as a profit model rather than treating a sense of loss or community. Silicon Valley and others have picked up on that gap, and the sense of community needed by members of society is now filled. It's filled with what Jim Morrison called the universal mind, and others have called a hive mind. Their meaning in their lives is to be a gatekeeper. Lastly, to paraphrase the Matrix, these people will fight with their lives to defend the Matrix Neo. There's nothing you can do about it. I yield the floor.
Excellent show. Well done, bro. I have nothing else to add. Yeah, folks, if you haven't, I'll go left. He had to jump off.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Folks, thank you so much for listening in. Again, with all of Veles' shows, I would recommend that you go back and listen to it again. Have your notebooks ready and your dark roast in hand. With that being said, enjoy your weekends, and we'll be back on Monday, folks. Take care, everybody.
Take care, everybody.
Cheers.
Have a good weekend, V. V. OV. Still there, V?
Yeah, I'm still here. It's not letting me kill the stream.